the argument that I kept hearing was, what difference is one person going to make? What difference are you going to make? And it's like, I'm saying one thing and I'm saying, like, I'm doing this for selfless reasons because I really believe that my daughter needs to see this. And everyone is viewing it as this selfish thing. I try to follow signs in my life, and I thought that seeing my buddy at that funeral was a sign. I ended up doing some work with a veteran serving nonprofit on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And this was probably my biggest sign that I've ever had in my life. It was infuriating though, because I'm writing letters, I'm trying to talk to people. No one except for my mother understood what I was trying to say. And then this guy from another country just shows me that the Marines made a difference in his life, and now he's affecting probably hundreds of people.
Today, we have an honor of welcoming Mr. Chris Gonzalez to our Veteran Voices series. Mr. Gonzalez is a Marine Corps veteran who served 17 years, reaching the rank of Staff Sergeant. His military journey began in light armored reconnaissance before later transitioning into civil affairs, where his service included deployments to Iraq, Panama, and Afghanistan. Throughout his career, Mr. Gonzalez was recognized for his leadership, his impact, and receiving the Navy Marine Corps Achievement Medal and the Navy Commendation Medal twice. Beyond his military service, Mr. Gonzalez has continued to lead and serve as a president of A&G Associates, where his work includes project management, strategic planning, program design, evaluation, and initiatives supporting military personnel, veterans, and military families. Mr. Gonzalez has also had a meaningful contribution in areas of mental health, substance use, crisis response, and veteran support, including stakeholder efforts connected to the 988 mental health crisis line. His background also includes service as an 8th grade social studies teacher, which is fantastic, which adds another layer to his story, and as an educator, facilitator, and leader committed to helping others understand complex issues and move towards practical solutions. Contributed as the associate producer of Bastards Road, a full-length film about Marine Corps veteran confronting post-traumatic stress by walking across the country. In today's conversation, we look forward to learning more about Mr. Gonzalez's military journey, his transition from service into leadership and advocacy, and the important work he is continuously currently doing around the National Veteran Calls to Action. With that, we're honored to welcome Mr. Gonzalez to Veteran Voices, and we're so excited to have you here. Welcome, Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent, excellent. No, thank you for joining us again. This platform here is just to make sure that not only do we honor our veteran community, but we want to make sure that we have the opportunity to speak with veterans, obviously during and thereafter their service, right? And what I mean by veterans, I mean military personnel that has also transitioned into veterans, right? So with that being said, I'm really excited to have this conversation, first and foremost, because myself, I'm a naval veteran, right? Obviously partnered with the Marine Corps, all Department of the Navy, right? So really, really
Exactly.
excited to have that conversation. But all in all, I want to kind of open up the floor with the question that we always open up the floor with. We want to know, as veterans and also the veteran community, what led you to actually join the military?
Well, first, let me say thank you for an awesome introduction. I really appreciate that. And thank you for having me. Uh, there's a couple of things that led me to join the Marine Corps. First, my cousin Jerry was a Marine Corps veteran in the Desert Storm era. He was in the Chicago area. He deployed, and I remember as a middle school student, kind of thinking that was really cool that he was doing something like that. I have an uncle who had served in Vietnam. I had two grandfathers who were actually in the Army during World War II, but weren't deployed during World War II. So military service was definitely part of my family. On the other hand, I graduated from high school and I was a bit bigger. I was a football player. I was an offensive lineman, so I was about 250. As I got to the end of that summer, I was about 300 pounds almost. So a lot of my buddy, yeah, I'm nuts about weight and all those things now, just because of how I used to be. But a lot of my friends went in right out of high school, and I wasn't able to join them based on my own circumstances. I then went to work construction, and I realized that was way too difficult. And after that, I went to college, and then during college, I actually joined the Marine Corps Reserves.
Excellent. No, that's fantastic. Sounds like you definitely have a kind of in your bloodline there, right? Going, multitude of family members joining the military. Um, but I guess when that transition happened in the military, just going, I guess, leading up into that, obviously being inspired by your family members, was there any type of I guess challenges or thoughts when you were actually going to the boot camp process and going to, going to the recruiter and so on and so forth? Was that how was that? How was that? Because there's always a lot of friction points for most veterans. But were there any for you?
Mhm. Uh, but honestly, one spring break, I had a lot of friends who were doing, the Cancun thing during college, and I was just sitting around like a jerk. And I'm like, you know what? I need something a bit more intense in my life. And not that I didn't enjoy school, I enjoyed college a good bit, but I was missing something. And so, spring break of '99, I just walked into the recruiter's office, I signed up, and then that summer, I just left.
Hmm. Gotcha. Nice. 1999. Kind of a year when kind of the unknown, right? Y2K, everything was supposed to be coming along, right? Kind of destruction, disaster, everything coming along with that. But now, when you were deployed, where were you deployed? I'm sorry, not deployed. When you went off to boot camp, where did you actually serve in boot camp? Where was your first stop there?
Well, let's see, man. Even in getting ready for boot camp, I came in a little bit overweight, so I had to spend an extra 3 days in Glen Burnie, Maryland, at the MEPS, the Military Enlistment Processing Station. And finally, I got to Parris Island, South Carolina. And as soon as I got there, I knew that this was for me, right? So I mentally prepared myself for all the dudes yelling and screaming and the intensity. And sure enough, I stepped off onto the yellow footprints in South Carolina, and it was kind of history since.
Wow. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. You knew immediately when you got there this was for you. How did you know that? What clicked in you?
Did you play sports when you're in high school or at college or anything like that? You know that moment right before, and I refer to football because that was the sport I played. You always had a bunch of butterflies in your stomach, and that first point of contact, you knew that this was your day, right? And it was kind of that same exact feeling where it's like, you take a plane, doesn't seem real, down to North Carolina. And then from North Carolina, you jump on the charter bus. And you're like, no big deal. This doesn't seem so real. And then you cross into the gates of Parris Island and you start to get those same butterflies. And then your initial drill instructor comes on, and he gives you a set of directions, and then he immediately starts yelling. And as soon as he comes on and then he starts yelling, it's like that first contact in football. Like that it's game on, it's ready. This is your time to do what you've been mentally preparing yourself to do for quite some time. And that's how I felt.
Wow. Wow. No, I definitely know exactly the moment that you're feeling that
Mhm.
feeling there. Definitely, we're referencing sports, right? Definitely, you're gonna have a great game. You know you're gonna get.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm contact. Oh no, this is my day. Now I have to take that moment. No, that's excellent. That's fantastic. Now, I guess with that, I mean, there's so many different moments that happen in service, but we can go on from boot camp and so on. But now, when you're in boot camp, what were some of the challenges that you had? Because there's so many different things that is challenging. Uh, for myself, just to kind of give you an example, there is so many things of mental juncture that you go through, different changes, differences of relationships, and but I met some of the most best people in the military, But now, while in boot camp, some people challenges were larger than others. Did you have any standout moments of that?
There were two challenges that I can recall that were significant. The first was physical, the other was mental. So the first was climbing the rope. As a bigger guy, I never had a ton of. I was a pretty strong guy in terms of like a bench press and things like that. But if you asked me to do pull-ups, I had to do the bare minimum to get into boot camp. So as we were climbing the rope, I just couldn't get the technique down, and I wasn't strong enough to just muscle it up like some of the people were. Uh, so I failed the first couple of times. I fell off the first time without doing it, and the drill instructor's yelling you, do it again, and you're so fatigued by that point. So I failed a couple of times. He tells me, get out of here, and you're not going to graduate boot camp unless you figure out how to do this. So from there, it was kind of a stress point. But even after we were done for the day and had a little bit of free time at night, I was doing extra pull-ups and push-ups and all that stuff. So that was the first thing. And man, when I got to the top of that rope for the first time, it was like this feeling of invincibility. Like it was the first time that I really struggled physically through something and thought to myself, like, maybe you should give up and kind of push through it and said, you know what, you're going to do it. You're not going to let yourself fail. And sure enough, I didn't. So that was probably about early in maybe the first 3, 4 weeks. The other was around just kind of the mental aspect of teamwork, because you have all these people from
Mm.
all these different walks of life, and some people can't do anything right. And it's like I didn't think it was that hard. You just follow instructions, and you don't get yelled at that much. But some people just couldn't do anything right, and my patience with them was very thin. And I just wanted to be this tough guy. And finally, a guy that I was close with was like, instead of yelling at this guy, why don't you help him? you know, why don't you, instead of like making him feel bad, why don't you do a few things to help him out? And so I said, that's not my job, blah, 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 blah. And he said, well, maybe it should be. You know, maybe you're missing the point of boot camp altogether. And I was like, wow, maybe I am. And sure enough, it was kind of that mental breakthrough moment that, you know, getting through wasn't necessarily about my own development, but really the development of how you fit into a team, how you work as a team, and how you make your other people to the left and to your right better.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and I think that's something that we carry just as a veterans period. A lot of times, that team camaraderie, definitely when you transition from sports, right? It's always having each other's back, and because if you don't, obviously when we're talking about the military, that could be detrimental. So, no,
Right.
that transition is excellent. That's fantastic. I think that right there really shapes everything. That really shapes everything, right? But now, obviously, going through that, were there certain aspects where you were able to position someone, I guess, uplift someone, and also help those people that they were talking about that probably just couldn't get it right at those moments?
I think it was just a different mindset. I can't say that I have any specific things that I can remember that really that stood out as like the time where I extended a hand and clasped hands and pulled the guy up or something like that. I mean, there were of course moments in the final period of Marine Corps boot camp. There's this thing called the Crucible, and it's brutal. It's several days of not sleeping and eating and all that stuff. So there is no way to get through it unless you act as a team. So I do remember just getting really close with that group of guys and making sure that, like, you know, at the end, you feel like when you accomplish the end of the crucible and you hold the Eagle Globe and Anchor in your hand, you feel like you would die for the guys that you went through. Again, you had known them for maybe 2 months before, 3 months before that, but the bond of getting through that tough time was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, adversity will definitely bond personnel more. I would say bond personnel or anyone just in general would definitely bond you more than any type of trauma would, right? Because we talk about trauma versus adversity. Adversity, you're going to overcome that, well, as long as you overcome it together. Some never really overcome the trauma, and I think this is where understanding that in those adverse moments, you're always going to come through and stand tall. But now with that, obviously graduating boot camp and going off to the fleet, how was that experience for you? And what was your first duty station?
Well, actually, my journey was a little bit different than most. I actually went to the Marine Corps Reserves while in college. So I did a split program where I was in boot camp one summer, actually went back to school, joined the Marine Corps Reserve unit, Light Armored Reconnaissance Unit in Frederick, Maryland, Bravo Company, 4th LAR, and then did on the job training for a year. And then the following summer, went to School of Infantry. So it's like I had these dual lives. It was quite interesting.
Yeah, I actually want to know more about that because I personally think it's a lot more difficult than being truly submerged all the way into active duty because now you really are, like you said, living a dual life. And that dual life still is a coming to the UCMJ that you must abide by. So what was that? What was that like for you when? Because again, you're younger at this time frame, and you have a different type of mindset. And just like any young personnel, right? They don't think anything's applied to them. But how was that for you, being able to adjust in that way? Because most do not speak about that challenge of the reservists.
I mean, I personally loved it because it's like I had these dual lives. So I was a college student in a college in Western Maryland, and it was kind of a party college. And so, like 3 weeks out of the month, I'm partying, and then 1 week out of the month, I'm training for, training to jump out of an LAV and do scout related things and shoot weapons. And so it's like you couldn't ask for like these two different environments. And the only bad thing about it was you could depend on the best parties of that month falling on the weekend where you had to go do Marine Corps things and you had to go away.
But that
But
sounds
even as
very
I,
similar to active duty too. So
yeah. But the thing is, as life progressed, uh, there were just some wild moments. Like September 11th, 2001, I was in grad school to become a teacher, and I had just taught my first lesson. And so, I'm feeling great about myself. And it was a senior class, and it was more a world religions class. So it was more of just a thought provoking conversation. Um, and then the teacher that I was working with comes into the classroom, and he had this terrified look on his face. And I'm like, oh no, I screwed up the lesson, didn't I? And sure enough, it was, the plane things on 9/11, the plane attacks on 9/11. And then after that was my reserve weekend. And so then I go in, and everybody's ready to go to war. Everybody's ready to get after it. And so I leave the reserve weekend and I go back to my master's program, and my mind's not in the game at all. And so, like, I'm doing a half-assed job on my studies and on my assignments, and and it, the program that I was in, you couldn't get anything below an 80 or that's failing. And so I was starting to get really bad evaluations. And so the next thing you know, one of my advisors was like, either you drop out or you're all in, but you can't do this half thing anymore. And that was one of the best pieces of advice, but probably one of the biggest early ways of a difficult situation with trying to juggle this military commitment with a civilian life.
wow, yeah, yeah. I can only imagine how difficult that could be. And why I say that is because a lot of people actually really go and they're reservists, yeah, but they probably deployed more than actual active duty personnel that has ever deployed. And I don't want to never discount that. And I think a lot of times people actually discount the reservists a lot of times, and trust me, I know that there has been multiple occasions that reservists are there, being able to be deployed, being able to really pick up the slack and get things going. But now, I guess with you actually making that transition, how was that? What was going on in your mind doing you're making that transition out of school and actually really, really putting yourself in a different position here?
Well, I guess the other push pull of the military versus civilian was 2002. I graduate my master's program to become a teacher. I'm crazy excited. I get a job teaching eighth grade social studies in Howard County, Maryland. And Howard, eighth grade social studies was early US history. Um, so, sure enough, in January of 2023, I get called up to Iraq. So my first year of teaching, I'm teaching U.S. history, and then I get called up to go to Iraq as part of the push into Iraq, where then I can live history. So it's like, on one hand, I'm kind of, it's a little disappointing to leave, which not really, but on the other hand, it's like I get to be a part of something that I one day will teach, and I don't know, it was really cool, but just like it's just another example of how crazy uh, the juggle is between the reserves.
No, that's definitely a juggle, right? Now going into Iraq, I mean, I'm sure that there has to be some type of excitement, fear, just trying to get. I mean, just my experience in deploying. You don't know what you don't know, right? And kind of just going into it with, open arms and open sided. I'm like a deer in the headlights. However, I know we got to get the job done, right? And get out here
Yeah.
and get to it. So was that same feeling when you had to actually deploy? What was that like when kind of really seeing and touching down on soil, right? And boots on ground?
Well, it's weird because in 2003, you have so few frames of reference, right? There were no movies about Desert Storm for the most part. You had Vietnam movies and you had World War II movies for the most part. So you really didn't know what to expect. And even in the unit, you might have had two guys that deployed to Desert Storm, but this was just a totally different thing. So I'm kind of a prepare for the worst, hope for the best type of guy. And I'm a kind of, in my mind, I'm very much a scenario planning guy and kind of like to have a plan A, B, C, and D. Honestly, man, I kind of mentally prepared myself to not come back. I told myself you need to mentally prepare yourself that this will be your last time leaving, last time seeing your parents. Sorry if they're listening right now. Um, the last time seeing your buddies, and you need to also prepare yourself for the person, your brothers, that they might not make it back too. And so I kind of feel like I almost front loaded some of the trauma, even though it wasn't trauma at that point. But I just really prepared myself mentally, and then everything else from that was good because I had already prepared for the worst.
Yeah, yeah. And I definitely resonate with that because I mean, you don't know going into anything. There was, as you just mentioned, and again, for myself going in 2005, there were no definite instances of what Desert Storms looks like, what's going on. The reference movie I have is Pearl Harbor. I'm like, well, that's Pearl Harbor, and so you are preparing yourself to enter a fight or enter um, an environment that could really change you and also change the circumstances of the people around you forever. But when you're there, what is that experience like there? I just want to know, just from your perspective, because it's kind of mentally preparing, but actual day to day, what does that look like?
I was telling my girlfriend Brooke this the other day. The biggest enemy I always thought was complacency and boredom. Because you wake up in the morning, let's say, well, when I first got there, we were staged in Kuwait for quite some time, and so it's like we woke up and trained, and every day is like Groundhog Day. And your leadership would say, "Get ready, we're going to go soon," but the date for going kept getting delayed and kept getting delayed. So you're like, all right, fine. I'm just going to go when I'm told to go. I don't think we're ever going to actually go into Iraq. And then finally we do this push, and it's like once again, I'm mentally prepared to not come back. And I think as soon as we cross the line into Iraq, it's going to be firefights and movies, it's going to be just like the movies. And it wasn't. It was like, it was desert and boredom. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to stay hard and stay relevant and stay strong. And it's just like hours and hours and hours of boredom. And you might pass a human or might pass a flock of sheep or a couple camels, but it's like, it's just everything that you thought was going to happen was totally different. And after a day or so, we did get into a couple of firefights, and those were intense, and your adrenaline spiked and everything. But for the most part, when you're in an LAV, like their forces are no match for us. We were a battalion of LAVs, so as soon as we got engaged, we destroyed whoever was our enemy very quickly. So those feelings of intensity and those feelings of actual battle were so quick compared to the feeling of boredom, like fighting complacency and staying really focused and not, just not dozing off and thinking about home or thinking about, some other fun things or what you're going to eat when you get home or something goofy like that.
No,
You know
yeah.
what I'm talking about a bit too.
Yeah, I extremely do. You're just sitting there, literally, just because. But the adrenaline of going, hey, we're gonna go, we're gonna go, we're gonna go, we're gonna go, and then actually getting there, it's like, well, nothing, and but then you feel the time, but now you don't feel the void with things that probably aren't the best, right? And a lot of sailors and a lot of soldiers got it, pretty, in trouble with, like you said, complacency, right? And that was the thing, always staying focused and trying to remain focused because when it does come, it comes. Uh, but I personally always believe, again, we have the greatest military in the world, continuously and ongoingly. And that's why we have been so successful for many years of things. But like you said, we'll be able to really close off the gap in a lot of different of those situations. But now again, obviously there's so many different things that happen in the military when you are there that can shape your civilian life, right? And I think that is a very valuable moment. Were there any particular pinpointed moments where you feel as though, while being and while serving, that really shaped who you are amongst your transition to the civilian sector?
Well, you know, coming back from Iraq was one of the more interesting things for me because as soon as I got back, I spent a little time on active duty and then I transitioned back to reserve. And so my school had a big parade for me, and even the what you see behind me, that my head's kind of blocking it, but that thing is a newspaper clipping from when they had a big parade, that Chris Gonzalez Day. Uh, so as I got back to teaching, I got into a relationship with the woman I eventually would marry, and then my unit was getting ready to go back to Iraq, and I said, you know what, I think it's time for me to take a break. Because at that point I was really enjoying being a teacher. I didn't want to put my wife at the time through a deployment because my first one I was single and I could have stayed there forever. Um, and so it was a very difficult decision for me to get out. And then actually 5 years later, I ended up going back into the reserves, into the civil affairs field, and then went to Afghanistan.
Okay. Okay. Oh wow. So and that I guess that's what we speak about, right? That transition, that dual life, and that was being able to make the choice, the conscious choice of not wanting to put your family through that. Because I tell you, I tip my hats off to everyone that has a family, a relationship, a spouse. Just in the military period, is so very difficult to maintain. But beyond that, just to be able to make the decision to go back to the military, it's just it's such a hard thing. So I guess being able to be back, that feeling had to be very joyous to be with the children, being with your spouse, and enjoying that time in life, right? So, but what urged you and positioned you to want to go back in regards to the civil affairs?
Well, I don't mean to get deep on you on a Friday, but uh, in 2000, I ended up having a child. I had a daughter, and since since I got out, I kept in touch with a lot of people, and I had a daughter. And right after she was born, my old unit was in Afghanistan, and a friend of mine was killed. So I went to his funeral, and I started talking to some of my friends, and one of them had gone into civil affairs. And so he said, what your job is you're out with the grunts, but you're also looking at different aspects of society where we're looking at getting people on our side who previously could be our adversaries. So looking at things like education, public health, rule of law, economic development. So you're pulling different levers so that people are supporting what you're doing, which in turn a lot of times makes the violent activity go down. So in a place like Afghanistan, some of the civil affairs people, the better job they did, the less violent attacks there were on US troops, which meant people were coming home to their kids. And so I started looking at my daughter, and I started thinking I was meant to see my buddy to tell me about that. And I have to follow this. And what kind of an example am I to her if I don't follow what I think is right? Because especially if I can use my skills that I've learned to do a good job and more people can come home to their daughters, then I should sacrifice for others. And I should show her that that's important to being a good citizen. Uh, and so I really felt strongly about it. I got in a lot of fights with my wife at the time. She's not my wife anymore, probably because I went back to the Marines. I got a lot of fights with my family, with her family, and everyone thought that I was being selfish about going back because they thought I just wanted to go to combat again. But really, I thought I was being selfless by going back to the Marines because I felt compelled to do so that I could set the example for my daughter.
No, I can't agree with you more. Um, they instill a selfless gene in you when you talk about the camaraderie for your, again, brothers and sisters at arms, right?
Yeah,
You feel a urge to want and need to protect the people that, again, you serve with. And also to be able to lose someone, and that you knowing you could have been a person that could have actually, really possibly protected it, you know.
right. But it was infuriating though because I'm writing letters, I'm trying to talk to people, and it's like no one except for my mother understood what I was trying to say, and it was like banging my head against the wall. And it's like I'm saying one thing, and I'm saying like I'm doing this for selfless reasons because I really believe that my daughter needs to see this, and everyone is viewing it as this selfish thing. But I'll give you a story. So I try to follow signs in my life, and I thought that seeing my buddy at that funeral was a sign. I ended up doing some work with a veteran serving nonprofit on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And this was probably my biggest sign that I've ever had in my life. So I go out um, to a grand opening of a group home, right? It was a nonprofit. They took a lot of veterans off the streets, homeless guys off the streets, cleaned them up from drugs and substances, got them vocational training, and then helped them get back on their feet. And I helped them raise some money, and they raised about $300,000 to buy a big group home on the Eastern Shore. At the grand opening, they announced that instead of buying it, the group home was donated by this little tiny Haitian guy. And they asked him to come up and speak and say a little bit about why you donated this house instead of sold it. And he said, um, as a young man in Haiti, the Marines came in and they kept my family safe. And I swore that one day I would make it to America and I would pay them back. And sure enough, that little Haitian guy went from Haiti to Maryland. He started investing in homes, and he was one of the more wealthy investors on the Eastern Shore. And the argument that I kept hearing was, what difference is one person going to make? What difference are you going to make? And then this guy from another country just shows me that the Marines made a difference in his life, and now he's affecting probably hundreds of people by doing, by then paying it forward. So after that, I stopped listening to the what impact can you make or what difference can you make.
Mm. No, that's amazing. Oh man, that gives me chills. That gives me chills because one person can make so much of a large impact. I'll tell you, the ripple effect is just a tremendous, right? And again, we talk about a lot of military personnel having those issues because of the transition. But now you're talking about the transition out and also the transition back in because it's being misunderstood. And I think that's a really big thing that we host. And because again, there's so much honor, there's so many standards, there's so much expectation of oneself and higher self if you want to be in that role. And that's what it sounds like you exhibited every step of the way, you know. No, and that's amazing. Now, I asked though, was it something that again when you were dealing with those transitional issues? Because we have a lot of veterans that come to us to speak about these things. Were there any type of impact on you, physically or mentally? Because it's so hard, right? Because you're going against the grain against the ones that you love.
Well, the marriage did not last. uh, Went to Panama as kind of a mini deployment, and it did not work out so well. So, the marriage did not last. Actually, going to Afghanistan was one of the better things because it then put some distance in time between my wife, soon to be ex-wife at the time. Uh, but I can't say that it truly took a negative toll on me mentally or physically. Like, yes, I may have some health complications. Like my body is different now. Um, but for the most part, that's also from years of hardcore physical training and everything too. So I got no clue what's happening. But you know, I think from a positive point of view, I've died in my head twice. I've prepared myself to die twice, and here I am. And so I can do anything. There's literally nothing that could stop me. And every day is kind of not every day, because sometimes I do get a little whiny, I'll be honest. But a lot of days are filled with such gratitude for having my life, limbs, and sanity that it's kind of affected my life in such a positive way.
That gratitude, it just of life, because you see so much around you, right? And that's amazing. I really love that because I tell you, unfortunately, there are some brothers and sisters in arms that go through those transitions, and those transitions are very difficult because
Hmm.
acclimation into civilian sector has been some of the most difficult times of most veterans' lives. And it may not happen year one, year two, year three, even. It can happen year 5, 10, and next thing you know, you find yourself struggling and battling. You know,
Hmm.
and it's just amazing to hear the other side of it, right? The other position, because again, it's positioned you in gratitude. It's positioned you in gratitude. But now, with that experience, that military experience, right, with civil affairs, with being in reconnaissance teams, and really understanding how the Marine Corps work, getting into your profession today, how did that come about?
Oh, well, uh, up until about 2006, I really enjoyed teaching. It was really frustrating being broke. And so I started doing real estate and teaching at the same time and realized it was not sustainable. I was trying to juggle two professions and it was just taking a toll on me. So I actually ended up leaving teaching, partially because I was frustrated with the administrative side of it and the standardized testing. the moving away from critical thinking to moving towards teaching to a multiple choice test. That drives me crazy. Um, but 2006, I ended up going full time real estate. And I did okay, but I still felt like there was something missing. So my business partner in 2008, also remember 2008 was not a good time in real estate, uh, brought up the idea of us joining forces and starting our own business together. And she said, a lot of the stuff you've done as a teacher and as a Marine and as other parts of your background are very applicable in management consulting. There's contracts set aside for veteran owned businesses. And, my business partner, who actually happens to be my mother, had been doing management consulting in the government space for, quite some time. So she had some work that she could have pushed our way to get started. So she suggested it. I thought she was crazy. And like a month later, we're like, all right, let's do it.
That's phenomenal. That's great. So now you're talking about management consulting, and just taking some of the skill sets from the military now, but now it's a more family based at that time frame, right? Um,
Mhm.
Now with that, how going into business and kind of leading up into the business development portion of it, how was that experience as because again we talk about teams and leadership and different aspects of things of that nature, but now with family, how did that transition go for you getting into the business?
Well, we had planned to have me as the president and majority owner as the veteran, um, even though she was clearly the brains behind the operation and everything. So she was the vice president. Uh, And so, from the family perspective, on one hand, you'll never be able to trust someone more than your mother. Trust was always there. On the other hand, I now became her boss, which that was quite a transition. Wh- how many sons can say they had the boss for their moms? Very few, I bet. Uh, so, it's like learning the ropes of a management consulting, learning all the goofiness of the government and all of the acronyms and silliness of government acquisition, while also still trying to portray when I'm going out networking that I'm the president of this company that we had just formed.
No, that's interesting. So, I mean, obviously, the formation of the organization, right? And again, AG and Associates, correct? Now, could you explain exactly what you guys do in relation to, I guess, management consulting, strategic planning, and different things of that nature?
Sure. Well, there's probably several flavors of management consulting. Some are more tech related, some are more finance related. What we do really has three main components to it. And so that's looking at strategy and implementation, helping organizations figure out with their program or programs where they're going, how they're going to get there, what key pieces need to fall into place, both internally and externally. Second component being data and looking at what numbers tell the story of success or not success, and making sure that you use data to make decisions, not to just stare at it and say, look at the problem, look at the problem. Uh, yeah, like sometimes we do. And then the third component is looking at stakeholder engagement and partnerships and understanding that a lot of things, especially with the federal government, happen in Washington, D.C., and happen sometimes with the best of intentions, but not always with the best forms of execution. So a lot of times programs go from the federal level to the state level to the community level and then down to guys like us. So there's a lot of hands in the pot. So we try to align all those groups to make sure we're all on the same page before programs actually get to the everyday person.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it is highly, highly, highly needed, right? Just for transparency purposes, myself, I'm again a doctor of public policy, finishing up my
Hmm.
program there, so I'm very well aware of the implementation
You know.
issues, right? But now, I guess what does that really look like? Because Speaking about implementation issues, and again, coming from the government side and the public sector, now there's so much change that happens, but there's not enough impact that could have been based upon the data, right? Um, what do you guys do to specifically make that impact really, really impactful do a government change or a government initiative, rather? And again, just so the people can really understand, at a real, real high level. I mean, intense level.
So I think one of the key things that we do well is understanding how to look at data that makes sense. And I did another podcast about AI and the government, and I said the government struggles not with lack of data, but with an abundance of it. And some of that is compliance data, some of that is financial data, and some of that is um, it's just erroneous things that they care about because legally they have to care about them. But really, if you start looking at the community-based impact and you focus on the impact to society or the impact on the designated socioeconomic group or whoever you're trying to reach, then you could start to see you may not always have a massive change off the bat, but if you can look at here's a small change and we have a high level of confidence that if a small change happens, then the second thing can fall into place and the third thing, right? So if we stand up, let's say an outreach site for a government program, and we use number of clicks on the website as our only data point. In a year, if we just measure the number of clicks, that could be what tells a story of success. Social scientists will say that that's not success, that's not really impact, there's no change of behavior. But I would argue that in that year, now so many people know about the program. Second year, we then get into the next set of behavior changes that we want to see, third and fourth. And so it's understanding how to wade through all of the different pieces of data and focusing on the stuff that really is impactful.
Phenomenal. And I love it so much because I concur so heavily because when we talk about data analysis, and again, I don't want to go too far into the real nuts and bolts, but I talk about the data analysis and being able to analyze how the success and who doesn't impact, right, on the other end. But every success metric, it doesn't really have a like quantitative impact on the other side at all times. And we have to understand that, But however, if you have the understanding that it could really just impact a morale in the building and how that can actually siphon off and impact the numbers as well, that's really something that can really be measured. And no, I love that so much. But now, again, being a government contracting organization, there's a lot of veterans that are looking to get into those fields and doing different things of that nature. How was that experience for you? And do you have any advice for any veterans who are looking to be able to work with the government?
Uh, it took me a long time to learn government acquisition and all of the terms and just the weird ways that the government does business. It's like, and this probably resonate with you. It's like you have to fight logic in so many ways. And so, there are a lot of contracts set aside for veteran-owned businesses, but I think people should remember a couple of things. There's also thousands of us out there, and I learned that very quickly and probably in a very difficult manner when we first started. We focused on like Department of Defense and VA, and then we quickly realized we're not positioned to win contracts here. There's thousands of other veteran-owned companies here. So my advice would be look for relationships with other companies who are already established. That's what we ended up doing and focused on subcontracting for some time. instead of trying to chase the business and chase the proposals and spend all the time to do that, focus on the partnerships, focus on taking a small, tiny piece of work and just doing a phenomenal job on that, and then build your portfolio of more small pieces of work till you're ready to turn those pieces into something bigger. But don't, the old Marine Corps saying slow is smooth, smooth is fast is very much applicable to this situation. Because if you try, you're just going to waste time.
Yeah, yeah, and then and when you're talking about wasting time, that's so valuable, definitely in business, right? Because time is everything. But however, when we talk about it specifically from the, I guess the government contractor side, that you hit the nail on the head. I believe it's just being able to do an excellent job at something at something small to be able to build the portfolio, so you know that when you do actually go out for something larger, you have a full understanding of just everything. Because a subcontract, I think a lot of people will look at it as it not so glamorous. You learn so much in that time frame that actually is the financial impact. I believe personally, you know. But again, there's so many different ways to look at it. I think also when we talk about the veteran space, you know, we don't always have to go after the larger contractors in general to obtain a contract. We're able to work with an organization.
Well,
And I'm not.
I think there are unicorns that throw people off. And I think there are unicorns that are people who come out of the military and automatically get that 10, 20 person contract. And many others chase that same dream of, I'm going to get out of the military, I'm going to start my own company, and I'm going to be just like that guy and get my 20 person contract. It's a very rare instance where that happens. And I would advise people, don't chase the unicorns. For me, the steadier route was more successful with trying to prove my dependability uh, with subcontracting.
And how long did it take you to be able to get that reputation there?
About 5 years.
Wow, 5 years of just steady, just really just steady, just picking away at it, and that's amazing. I think that shows the resilience that you have to go through because there's so many different challenges. I think that people don't know about, right? They again, I just recently was speaking with at a webinar in regards to finance and government contracting and so on and subcontracting and being able to kind of look at that in a way of just applicable to real business, right? And what I mean by real business, I mean like private sector, right? Well, what? How does that? Again, just asking the question and posing the question, what are the difference between the two? There isn't. There isn't. You have to go through the business steps, and you can't take any shortcuts. And like you said, that outlier. But with that being said, I guess I do want to ask: do you think that you've instilled some military factors within your organization here today? And if so, what military values that you think you've instilled?
Well, it's funny because people would not think of the Marine Corps as a squishy relationship or squishy organization that values relationships over so much else. Uh, what they don't know is leadership in the Marine Corps is mission accomplishment is your first goal. You have to focus on the mission. But your next level down is troop welfare. You have to make sure your people are taken care of. And so I look at what would motivate a person, a young 21-year-old who's making less than minimum wage when you spread the salary over a 24-hour on-call period. What would make that person die for the brother or sister next to them? And that answer is, to me, relationships, strong relationships that you just know that person so well, personally, professionally, and care about them and their family, uh, and are that bought into a mission where you are truly, willing to give your life. And I've seen it in real, unfortunately, I've seen it in reality. Um, and so, if there's one thing I could say I've translated from the Marine Corps to AG Associates, it is the importance of relationships and the connectivity to the person to your left and to your right. And especially when times get tough and you really are dealing with a lot of stuff, personally or professionally, if you can lean on those people, that's a very powerful culture driver within your organization.
You mentioned culture. You mentioned culture, and organizational culture is so important. Um, and I think your story shapes around how the culture is infused into your business. Because again, dealing with the people in boot camp and being able to successfully want to understand and understand basically how to help them rather than how to put them down. But now, what advice, when you talk about culture, what advice would you give to be able to shape that? Because it's one thing to be able to talk about the values and understand, like, hey, these are the values that you want to instill. But how did you want to say shape your culture of the business?
Well, I think that both my business partner, again, she's my mother, but I call her Peg. Uh, Peg and I shared a very similar philosophy on relationships in terms of really valuing the people in our lives and trying to be overly inclusive. And sometimes that's a pro and sometimes it's a con with being overly inclusive, right? But as we started to hire people, uh, I think we really were intentional about hiring those with that same exact philosophy in terms of those that valued a strong work ethic, the view of I'm going to do whatever needs to be done to get the job done, not as opposed to that's not my job. Um, and then the third component, I would say, is someone who really understands relationships, and that's within an organization and the value of partnerships and network and things like that outside the organization, which then helps us get things done. Understand we can't do it all alone. So the more that we can leverage that outside network and help and uh, leverage, the more that we can, kind of, I guess, our network then serves as a force multiplier.
Mm, no, that's pin on the head right there. That's amazing. That's awesome. I again, I can go on and on about this because again, just being able to be intrigued of you guys' performance and also the level of business that you guys do. Again, AG Associates. Again, it sounds like you guys really have a hold on what you guys do and what you guys do best. But it took some time for sure. But now, I guess, with that being said, obviously military experience shapes all of this, and this is the show of veteran voices. We always want to give our veterans the most value out of these things. But now, I guess, for closing ask, there are several different experiences that transit that actually shapes us in our lives and also shapes us in our business. With your experiences, could you give again our veteran community the advice or being able to, not necessarily advice, but closing words in regards to what do you advise if again they are trying to one either get in this space of business or two being able to shape their lives as a transitional veteran that has those kind of values and understandings.
Sure. I'm going to focus on the everyday veteran who's transitioning out. Uh, I will tell you that let go of the military. I see so many people that think I'm going to get out of the military, but I'm going to keep my same friends. I'm going to connect with those guys every week. And you're not. You're just not. And I don't mean to say that to be a jerk. I'm just saying that you need to find a new tribe and a new community and a new group that you can feel like you're part of something that's truly engaging. And I'm not talking about, uh, you know, something that has to be like a large effort. Some people find a lot of meaning in leaning into their family or their church. Some people find a lot of meaning by going to a workout group. People love CrossFit. A lot of military people love CrossFit because it's a community of people that are going through a crazy ass workout together. And then you add the aspect to it of being with one another, and you hold each other accountable. Some people, like myself, started a business, and that's my way of engaging my community because it's like, wow, I've got this whole group of people looking to me for advice, and that's a big responsibility. And then others volunteer their time in nonprofits, and some do that as their calling, and others do that as volunteer, but they're serving others. And so, what I say to everybody is, you got to let go of the military. It will always be inside your heart. It will always be inside your soul. But you got to find new brothers and sisters. The other ones will still be there. They're just going to be at a different capacity.
That's phenomenal. That's amazing. Because again, I cannot express kind of some of the same sentiments. The military is going to be the military. It shaped you. Not only did it shape you, it presented who you could be today, and also instill some of the values that you may live with for the rest of your life. However, it is not something that is going to service you in spaces that of the civilian sector at times. So,
It's not going to
but
love you
with that,
forever, unfortunately.
yeah, it definitely won't. It definitely won't. And with that being said, I really, really, really enjoyed this time with you, and I want to go ahead and thank you for taking the opportunity to be able to speak and also speak and be able to join us here in Veteran Voices to be able to share your story, but not only your story, but AG Associate's story as well, because again, those phenomenal experiences are going to give the veteran or active duty member who is transitioning or who is being able to place themselves into a world of business. And now you're their guiding light. And I really appreciate your time here. And it was an honor to speak with you, Mr. Gonzalez. And with that being said, thank you so much. It was an honor to have you here on Veteran Voices.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for having me. It was great to meet you as well. Have a great day, everybody.